This is a CS Plus production brought to you by Baldwin Wallace University.
We're going to learn a little bit of HTML and CSS to create a solar system animation. Now, if you haven't already watched the CS Plus TechCam setup video, please take a look at that now to see how you can get your system set up for completing this TechCam. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code, which will allow some syntax highlighting to make it a little bit easier for you to see the code in this TechCam. You're more than welcome to download it and use it. However, you do not need to use this. You can use Notepad or TextEdit based on your platform. So here I'm going to start off by creating a new file, and I'm going to save it as solar.html. And then I'm going to go to my desktop, then open this up in Firefox. Now you can use any browser that you have. This should work for any browser. And then I'm going to bring Firefox over here to my desktop. And then now that I have both of these set up, now I'm ready to start with the cam. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to write some basic HTML. So I'm going to start with an HTML tag. And Visual Studio Code will automatically add the closing tag. But if you're using something like Notepad or TextEdit, you will have to enter those in manually. The next thing I'm going to add here is a head tag and a body tag. At any point as we're doing some coding here, feel free to pause the video to catch up. All right, so now that we have this body tag here, I'm going to add a div tag in there, and I'm going to give it a class called square. Essentially what a div tag is it just allows us to divide, hence the name div, our content within a web page. Within the head section here, I'm now going to add a style tag. And our style tag allows us to add CSS. So CSS is cascading style sheets. It allows us to style our web document, our web page. Now here I got a class called square, so I'm going to add a dot square here. And for me to build a square, the properties of a square is that it has an equal width and an equal height. And I'm going to use pixel values. So I'm going to say that the width of my square is 150 pixels and the height of my square is 150 pixels. And I'm going to give it a background color. Now, one of the things about using a tool like Visual Studio Code is that it provides these prompts, these hints for me, and it will help tell me if I have some code wrong. So I'm going to give it a background color of blue. If I save that, I can go to File, Save, and then go over here and refresh. I got a blue square. So I just made a shape. Now we have a square, but we're doing a solar system animation. And I don't know about you, but the last time I checked, the Earth is not a square, nor is the sun. So what we want to do is we want to turn this into a circle. So before we do that, we want to turn this into a circle. Now, in order to do that, there's several different ways we could do that. We're going to use CSS to our advantage here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the border here. And you'll notice, let's just start off with a small value. If I do 15 pixels, watch what happens to the border on the edges here. I'm going to zoom in on the web page here, just so you can see it a little bit more. Notice how they round it off here. So anytime that we want to make a round edge, we can use this border radius to do that. And you'll notice if I increase this value, becomes more rounded and even more rounded. And even to the point, if I were to change that 50 pixel to be 50%, I now have a circle. Now that we have a circle, it doesn't make much sense to have a class called square. So we're going to change that to circle. Now that change shouldn't affect anything, so if I save it, and I could do File, Save, or I could do the shortcut. If I'm on a Mac, it'd be Command S, or on Windows, Control S. And then go over here and refresh. Again, I could use another keyboard shortcut, either Command R on Mac or Control R on Windows. I should still see my circle. So now that we have our circle here, let's start working towards our solar system. A background color of white probably wouldn't be too fitting. We should probably change that to black. We could do this pretty easily by focusing on this body tag here. We could change the style of it. So I'm going to add a body selector within my CSS. And I'm going to change the background color. And one of the common mistakes when we're typing this selector or this style out is make sure you include that G there in background. And I'm going to set it to black. If I save that, go back over here and then refresh, that's a lot more like it. So the next thing I want to do is the star should have some sort of glow on the outer edge. And to do that, I'm going to change my circle from having a background color to doing a background image. Now we're not actually going to include an image here, but what we're going to include is a gradient. So a change from one color to another. Now there's a couple ways we could do that change. One is we could do it on a line, so from one edge to another, or we could do it from the center out. I'm going to do it from the center out because that's what a star would look like. And so I'm going to start from blue to white. I'm going to expand this out a little bit. And if I go back here and refresh, that looks more like a star. Now, another cool effect that we can do with CSS is we can add some effects if our mouse were to hover over something. So let's do that just to kind of see how it works. So on my circle class, I'm going to add the ability, if I hover over it, to kind of act like a black hole. And so if you think about a black hole, nothing can really escape a black hole. And so I'm going to change the width of my circle to 0 pixels and the height to 0 pixels. So now that I have the width and height to 0 pixels, I'm then going to set a transition here, which will be an animation, which is what we're going to be working with here. So I'm going to set the transition to 3 seconds, and if I go back over here and refresh, if I put my mouse over that star, notice how it changes slowly to 0 width and 0 height. And as my mouse goes off of it, you'll see it grow back. So it's kind of a neat effect that we can add to our animation. So now that we have our star there, let's go ahead and add a planet. So to add a planet, I'm going to do another style here. So I'm going to do a dot planet. And the planet should be smaller than our star here. So I'm going to set the width equal to 50 pixels and the height equal to 50 pixels. The background, I'm going to try to make it look like Earth. So I'm going to do a background image again, but instead of a radial gradient, I'm going to do a linear gradient. Linear meaning a line. And we can set the direction of this line. I'm going to have it go to bottom right. And then I'm going to go from green to blue. So it's going to kind of look like a marble, which from a distance, I guess you could say our Earth looks like that. And then I'm also going to change the position of our planet to be absolute. So meaning that we can set it anywhere on our HTML page. Now, typically the way that HTML works is you can think of it almost like Legos. As you put different elements on the page, they kind of stack from the top left to the bottom right. So this is what our planet looks like. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to add a planet. So I'm going to actually bump this up here. And I'm going to add div class circle and then planet. Now the way this works is when we include two classes here, which we can do, is we'll first include the properties for that circle class, and then the planet will override those properties. So meaning that even though I'm creating a div that has a class circle, which has a width and a height of 150 pixels, my planet will override those. Likewise, my planet will also override that background image setting as well. So if I save that, and then go back to our web page and refresh, we now have a planet. I guess it somewhat looks like Earth. Now, just to get the hang of how our animations are going to work, what we're going to do here is we're going to do an animation on our Earth just to have it move across the screen. To do that, I'm going to add an animation to the planet. I'm going to give it a name of straight orbit. Now this isn't going to be what our orbits like. Our orbits move somewhat in a circle. But even though this will be in a straight line, it'll just kind of get us comfortable with how we do an animation. So I'm doing animation, timing, function. And we're going to ease into our animation, meaning we're going to slowly build into it and then slowly build out of it. And then our animation duration, we can specify how long it takes. So I'm going to do 5 seconds. Animations in CSS are pretty straightforward. So here we're going to use keyframes, and we're going to give this a name. And we're going to specify what's the keyframe we're starting from, and then what's the keyframe we're going to. So we're going to start from the left side of our browser. So we're going to do 0 pixels. And then we're going to go to left 90%. And then so if I save that and go back and refresh, we'll see the Earth slowly move across the screen. Now I'm going to zoom back out. And there's our Earth moving slowly from left to right. Now I don't know about you, but there's a couple of things that we want to fix within our solar system. One is we should probably have that star be in the center. So let's focus on that first. Now, we didn't give our star a class, so let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to do a dot star. And I'm also going to change its position to absolute. To try to center this up, we can use a coordinate system which starts at the top left. And I'm going to do a top 50% and then a left 50%. And if I save that and then add to my div class down here where my star is, the actual class star, if I save that and then go back and refresh, it looks like the star is in the center. Let me maximize this though. It seems somewhat there. But if I were to draw a line down the center of my screen, it'd probably be about right here. And if I were to draw a line about horizontally across, it'd be about right here too. So it almost seems that this is the center point. Well, that would make sense. Let me kind of show you here. if I were to inspect that star, you'll notice that that center point is really the upper left corner of it. So the way that we build things out in our web page is really by using these blocks. So what we need to do is we need to shift it left and shift it up. So the way that we can do that is if we go back up to our star class here, I'm going to do a margin left, and our star has a width and height of 150 pixels. So in fact, I'm actually going to take these attributes here and move them down here to my star, because a circle is really going to have the border radius. That's what's going to make it a circle. But my star here, I'm going to have a different width and height set specifically for it. So I'm going to do that width of 150 pixels, height of 150 pixels, just like I had in my circle there. And then I'm going to take that margin left, and pretty much I want to bump this to the left halfway. And so if we take half the value of our width here and set it to a negative value, that will bump it to the left so that that halfway point is now the star is going to sit in the center of it. So if I save that and go back and refresh, we bumped it to the left a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my top. So I'm going to do a margin top and set that to negative 75 pixels. And so if I do that and I save it, I now see that in the center. And if I maximize this again, I refresh it, now that looks more like in the center. So I could draw a center line here and then a center line in the middle of my screen there. So now that we have our basic solar system set up, in the next video, we'll start creating planets that orbit the star.